your eyes?
You're so funny.
You're on. You got the knock.
Did he knock?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the December 2nd, 2019 Moscow City Council regular meeting. Would you all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
No, you didn't.
Okay, good.
First item on tonight's agenda is approval of the Moscow City Council November 18th, 2019 minutes. Would entertain an option for approval on that.
I move approval.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Art and seconded by Brandy to approve the minutes as presented. We'll start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Unanimous approval. The next thing on the agenda is the staff recognition report. Do you have anything for us, Mr. Reedner?
Nothing tonight, sir.
Thank you. The third item is a public comment and mayor's response period, where we allow 15 minutes for anyone from the public to come up and tell us what's on your mind, as long as it's not before the Planning and Zoning Board of Adjustment or tonight's agenda. So anybody that wants to speak out, please come up and do so. Seems to be an unpopular thing to do tonight, so we'll skip past that and move on to the acknowledgement of the election results. Mr. Reedner will tell us who got elected, even though I'm pretty sure we all know.
Thank you, Your Honor. As council can see from the agenda item, Idaho code requires that city council accept the canvassed election results from Latah County. As you know, Latah County conducts the election. The results have been canvassed by the Latah County Commissioners, but code requires that council also accept those canvassed results. The canvassed results are in the council packet, so we're asking the council to accept those results.
I would entertain a motion to accept the results as presented.
I move that we accept the results.
I bet you do.
I'll second.
So it's been moved by Ann and seconded by Brandy to accept the canvass results as presented. Start the roll with Catherine this time.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Reedner. Okay, moving on to item number 5, which is a public hearing tonight for an ordinance amending Title IV, Chapter 6 regarding the covered parking space requirements and miniature golf parking requirements in the city of Moscow. Mr. Mike Ray will tell us the proposed changes. Good evening, Mike.
Thank you, Your Honor, council members. So before you tonight, we have a couple amendments within an ordinance that the Planning and Zoning Commission has been working on for the last few months. The first one pertains to covered parking requirements. So this one is a little bit unique to Moscow in that we require some portion of covered parking on a property for single-family and two-family dwellings. And so every single-family or two-family dwelling requires 2 off-street parking spaces per dwelling. And then in the R1 zone, we require 2 spaces to be either in a garage or carport or designated on the property so that they could be covered in a future date, which means that they just have to meet setback requirements. And they need to show that on the site plan they submit to our office. And then any other residential zoning district, you're just required to provide 1 off-street parking space that is covered or could potentially be covered in the future. So the Planning and Zoning Commission has been discussing this, and this has been presenting some challenges in the past, mainly with tracking of these covered parking spaces, and it really comes into play when you have multiple dwellings on a single piece of property, and identifying those and then tracking those over time, should they do anything else on the property. So, like I mentioned, this is fairly unique to Moscow, and not very many other jurisdictions do you see with this type of requirement. And so Planning and Zoning Commission is proposing to eliminate from the off-street parking section of the code the requirement for covered parking. And then just another amendment we've been looking at, ended up dealing with a gentleman that's looking at a mini golf facility in Moscow, and we were looking through our off-street parking standards. Noticed that golf courses and country clubs were the same parking requirement as miniature golf facilities, even though the scale of those two facilities is much different in size, and I think this is just a result of transposing the requirement when we ended up updating these off-street parking standards about a year or two ago. And so we proposed to reduce that down to 1 per hole for miniature golf facilities instead of the 4 per hole that golf courses and country clubs currently is at. We had done a review of other jurisdictions, about 12 of them, and they range from about 1 per hole to 1.5 per hole. So we're somewhere in that range of the other jurisdictions, and so we proposed to reduce that to 1 per hole for miniature golf facilities. And the commission did conduct a public hearing, happened on October 23rd of this year, and they recommended approval of this proposed ordinance to City Council. And staff's recommendation is, after conducting the public hearing in consideration of testimony presented, approve the proposed ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary. I'd certainly be able to answer any questions you have.
This came to us at administration.
Yeah.
And I don't think we had any questions.
Seems to lower the cost of a single-family home by the cost of covering the parking place, so it plays into our affordable housing discussion.
Open public hearing?
Yeah, being no further discussion amongst the council here right now, I'll open the public hearing at 7:11. Anybody that wants to come speak in favor of this change, come to the podium now. State your name and address and tell us what you think about this.
Nils Peterson, Executive Director for the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust, 510 West Palouse River Drive. We explored a 3-unit townhouse project on a site that was challenging to get parking for the middle unit due to topography kinds of things. We came up with a solution, but then we're faced with, you can't have it uncovered. The parking that we found could be in the easement, but it couldn't be covered in the easement. So we abandoned the project. So there are real consequences to creating affordable housing. In addition to the cost one, the whole project went away. Anyway, so that's my thought. I would support, I don't know what to think about the miniature golf, but I would support the change for the residential. Thank you.
Mr. Peterson, would you think that the project may be revived if this change is approved?
The
Could this- could
parcel
this-
is sold to another buyer,
Oh, okay,
so it's dead. Yeah.
so that's a no. It's too bad.
Okay.
Anyone that would like to speak against or general comments about the proposed change, please come to the podium. Seeing no one come forward, at 7:13, we'll close the public hearing. Discussion amongst the council about this?
I think we went over it at
Right.
admin committee pretty well, and everybody seems to be in agreement. The public's in favor of, so I move that we approve the proposed ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Art and seconded by Gina that we approve the proposed ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary.
Yep.
Any further discussion on that?
I would just say, I think the elimination of it requiring to be covered doesn't affect the intent of requiring the off-street parking. That is unchanged, so.
Okay. With that, I'll start the roll with Catherine.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries
Mini golf.
unanimously. Okay, moving on to item number 6, which is also a
Honor.
public hearing.
You get to read it.
Oh, I need to read
assign number to it. You need to assign
Assign a number to it, which the clerk will.
2019-11, and you have to read it by title, sir,
19,
or assign somebody
Okay.
else to read it.
so. I don't have the entire ordinance in front of me, so. Okay, ordinance number 2019-11, an ordinance of the City of Moscow Municipal Corporation of the State of Idaho providing for the amendment of the Moscow City Code Title 4, Chapter 3, providing for an amendment to the accessory dwelling unit standards to eliminate the minimum lot size requirement.
I gave
That's
you the wrong one.
Right here.
Right here,
I probably can look it up right now.
Oops.
Thank you, Art. Okay, thank you, Gary. I'll just read it off the paper. Ordinance 2019-11, take two. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of the City Code Title 4, Chapter 6, regarding amendment to eliminate the covered parking requirement for single and two-family dwellings, provided for the amendment of off-street parking requirements for miniature golf facilities, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law. Whereas single-family and two-family dwellings are currently required to provide one off-street parking space per
I think you
dwelling.
need to do
Your Honor, you only
have
need
to
to
read
read
all
the capitalized portion at the beginning.
Okay,
So you're done.
so now therefore, be
Nope.
ordained. Okay, that's the other one. Okay, so that motion carries, and if Lori wrote that down, that it's been read as 2019-11, then we're good to go on to the next thing, eh? Okay. Item number 6 is a public hearing, ordinance amending Title 4, Chapter 3, regarding accessory dwelling unit, minimum lot size and utility requirements. Michael, tell us about that as well.
Thank you again, Your Honor. So this is a public hearing regarding ADU, which is accessory dwelling unit, minimum lot size, as well as utility requirements. And I thought I'd go through a little background on our ADU ordinance. It was initially approved April 6th of 2015. Essentially allow ADUs in all residential zones. However, they must meet the minimum lot size of the zone in which they're located in order to be eligible for an ADU. And we do have various development standards associated with ADUs, a requirement that the size of them is limited to 600 square feet or 40% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling on the property, whichever's less. That the occupancy be limited to 2 occupants within the ADU. That owner occupancy be provided on site, so whether the owner has to live in the primary dwelling or the accessory dwelling, and they can live in either one, but they're required to live on the property. And that 1 additional off-street parking space is required for the accessory dwelling unit on top of the 2 that are required for the single-family dwelling on the property. And to date, we've had 8 accessory dwelling units that have been permitted since the adoption of the ordinance. So over the years, over the last 4 or 5 years, we received numerous inquiries regarding ADUs, looking at establishing ADUs on non-conforming lots within the city. Most of these lots where people are inquiring about are located in traditional neighborhoods that are close to the city core, where higher density is already allowed. And we also have the goal of the comprehensive plan to promote a variety of housing types while preserving neighborhood character, which also in turn provides affordable housing. So we ran an analysis of all the non-conforming lots in town, and you can see those highlighted in red are all the non-conforming lots. So, all the lots east of Mountain View obviously are under current zoning requirements when they were created, and so they meet the minimum lot size requirements. But you have a lot of issues in these traditional neighborhoods. A lot of these areas were platted in the late 1800s or early 1900s prior to our first zoning code, which happened in the 1940s. And so, for instance, like the Park Edition, which does like some type of dog leg here, covers East City Park. You have a lot of lots within this area that don't meet the 7,000 square foot minimum lot size for an R2 zone. They're about 6,250 are the lot size of all those lots there. So if you look at the zoning districts across the city, you can see this lighter yellow color is the multifamily zone, R4, ends up transitioning as you head to the east. This is R3, which is medium density residential, and then transitions to the R2 zone, which is the zone which all the properties directly to the east of Mountain View are also within the R2 zone. So they have that 7,000 square foot minimum lot size requirement, but these are the areas where we have a lot of the issues with lot sizes. And then just looking at a closer profile of a typical neighborhood next to East City Park. You can see that the lighter shade of red on these properties represents the properties that are of non-conforming lot size. And so, I mean, you can go up and down the blocks and really don't know when you transition out of different zoning districts in these traditional neighborhoods. A lot of the neighborhoods are accessed via an alley at the rear of the properties. And a lot of the properties are of similar lot sizes, but you run into an equity circumstance where the neighbor on one side may not be able to have an ADU when the neighbor directly next to them can't have an ADU because of maybe 250 square feet of lot area that the one property does not have. And I wanted to just kind of go back. This is the data from the citizen survey that we used to create the ADU ordinance, and so we asked 1,200 residents within the city and got the results back. We asked the questions about supporting ADUs in the neighborhood, which came back as really just strongly agree or agree as the majority of the responses, and then looking at likely add an ADU to the property if permitted, pretty much strongly disagree or neutral. And so, what these results are telling us, I think what we've seen over the years are that, everybody's not going to run out to get an ADU as soon as they're approved, but they don't necessarily have an issue with their neighbors having them either. And then we broke this down by citizen survey sectors. Responses for strongly agree to the question of supporting ADUs in your neighborhood. Once again, pretty high response rates for that category. And then looking at the strongly disagree or disagree to the question of supporting ADUs in the neighborhood, which I think is the most telling because you had a number of neutrals in there for the strongly agree to agree. And then looking at the question of whether or not you're likely to add an accessory dwelling unit to your property, once again, pretty low. And then these were the questions that we used to generate the design standards for ADUs. So we looked at requiring design to be comparable to the existing house on the property, locations of entrances, and then owner occupancy, off-street parking, maximum occupancy, and maximum size. And so all the latter four, we ended up getting pretty strong results as to wanting those regulations, and that's why we ended up incorporating those into the current ordinance. So once again, just taking a look at all the non-conforming properties. And so after discussing this for the last couple, 2-3 months, Planning and Zoning Commission feels pretty comfortable moving forward with an amendment that would eliminate the minimum lot size requirement for eligibility of accessory dwelling units. And so we would leave all the rest of the regulations that we currently have. We think those are working fairly well, but we would just eliminate the minimum lot size eligibility requirement to have maybe some more property owners in these traditional neighborhoods be eligible for having an ADU on their property. And then also looking at, we had another amendment that was just incorporated as part of this, and we have a requirement right now that if you have an accessory building, so garages, workshops, other structures that utilize electricity and or water, if they're accessory to single-family or two-family dwellings, they're required to be serviced off the same meter, same service as the single-family dwelling. And really that's to in perpetuity control the use of that structure. If it has a separate meter on it, it has higher a tendency to end up being rented out in the future. But really, accessory dwelling units are really intended to be separate dwellings and, are allowed to be rented out. And so we really don't have an issue with those having a separate meter. We've also run into circumstances, our electrical inspector has run into circumstances recently where there's been a house service that's needed to be, the panels needed to be upgraded, or the service coming into the dwelling has needed to be upgraded at a substantial cost to accommodate a second dwelling on the property, which is the accessory dwelling unit. And so there's been some cost issues there as well. So we would recommend a proposal to exempt out accessory dwelling units as being required to have a second or a separate water or sewer meter on the property. So
The hookup fees still apply?
they
Do,
do,
yeah.
correct. Yeah. And on August 28th, 2019, the commission conducted a public hearing on the minimum lot size amendment, and then on the 23rd of October of this year, they conducted the public hearing upon the limitations on use table amendment for the meters, and recommended approval of both the city council. And after conducting the public hearing and consideration of testimony received, approved the proposed ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and then it'd be read by title and published by summary. And I'd certainly be able to answer any questions you might have.
Do you have any questions? Art?
This is redundant of what I asked back at the admin committee last week, but could you explore a little bit, for the benefit of those who weren't there, the issue of separate water metering and how that relates to sewer and sewer fee, where you might have 2 water meters going into a particular property, but only 1 sewer going out?
Yeah, typically for ADUs, they're, 2 dwellings are allowed to share the same sewer, but we increase the cost. So I believe it's a multifamily charge that's applied to the sewer bill, as well as the general facilities charge for the ADU. So meant to recoup some of the costs for the second
Right.
dwelling on the property.
Exactly, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Mike? Okay, with that, I'll open the public hearing portion of this at 7:26. Anybody that wants to come up and speak in favor of this, please do so.
Nils Peterson, Executive Director, Moscow Affordable Housing Trust, 510 West Palouse River Drive. I am in favor of each of these changes, and I'm bringing you 2 pieces of reading. The first is from Alan Durning from 2013, so 2 years before the ordinance was adopted. He at the Sightline Institute and the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, their green building folks, did a survey of Cascadia, the Pacific Northwest plus British Columbia, looking at ADU ordinances, and built a roadmap of all the things that you can put in your ordinance that will impede your success at developing ADUs. We have several of those. At any rate, so there's a roadmap of the things to avoid in the first article that's called ADUs and Don'ts. And then an update from the same folks at Sightline by Dan Berlote. Vancouver, British Columbia has 35% of all of its single-family homes have an ADU. Portland and Seattle, 1%. The reason? Code issues that they have introduced. Occupancy by the owner is a key one, and the parking space is a key one. So I'm in favor of these changes, and I commend you to go further and work on these issues more. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else speaking in favor? If not, any kind of testimony against or of a general nature? Come forward now. All right, then we'll close the public hearing at 7:29. Open it for discussion amongst the council. Have anything to say?
Well, yeah, I would say that, I think seeing the maps too, where You have some side-by-side properties where it's already been determined, there's an ordinance, the ADUs are permitted. If you meet this, in these neighborhoods, many of the lots can have them. So it's, the way it's just turned out, it's somewhat this hodgepodge of arbitrary, this lot can, this lot can't. I think the smaller lots by design may have, the extremely small ones may have quite of a challenge because they still do have to provide the off-street parking and a whole other structure, so just the size itself may limit that, but seeing the amount, the survey of strongly agrees that people are wanting to see these ADUs. We haven't had many of them, there've only been 8 of them since this was established, so we appreciate what Nils said, maybe some of these restrictions are unintentionally limiting the goal, which is to really see, okay, people want to see more of these ADUs to address some of the affordable housing issues that we've been talking about earlier. And it seems somewhat arbitrary that one lot can do that and the one next to it can't because it might be about 50 feet shy in property size.
Yep. I'd add that when we passed this ordinance back in 2015, we knew that there were likely to be some changes coming along and that it would be somewhat of an iterative process, and I think we're seeing the start of some of the changes to improve what we originally passed as time moves forward. And I don't think we ever get anything right out of the gate, but this certainly helps. So I think we're headed the right direction.
That's good to think about too, like when you first, I wasn't on the council then, but you kind of did that, let's see how it goes, and if there's this huge flood and suddenly it's becoming more than anyone can anticipate, but if anything, it sounds like maybe it hasn't achieved the end means
We give it a
quite yet.
little nudge.
Yep.
Mr. Boland, I move that we approve the proposed ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved by Gina and seconded by Catherine to approve it, approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary. Any further discussion on the matter? Start the roll call with Ann then.
Yeah, I just wanted to commend staff and P&Z for being proactive about looking at this too. And I think even doing things like running the model and having that map is really helpful. So yes, thank you and aye.
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
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 motion carries. So now read the ordinance, which is 2019-12, I'm thinking. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code Title 4, Chapter 3, providing for an amendment to the accessory dwelling unit standards to eliminate the minimum lot size requirement, providing for amendments to the limitations on the use table to allow accessory dwelling units to have separate electric and water meters, providing that the provisions of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, and publication according to law. Okay, that dispatches item number 6. Item number 7 is professional service agreement for construction, engineering, and inspection on the A Street Stage 2 Federal Aid Project. Good afternoon, Bill.
Thank you, Your Honor. As the council is aware, A Street will be the subject of a fairly large roadway construction project this upcoming summer, with the reconstruction of A Street from Peterson to Home and Line Street from Highway 8 up to A Street. And Circle Drive will be terminated in a cul-de-sac north of A Street at the completion of that project. That project was awarded to Motley & Motley of Pullman, Washington, in the amount of $3.8 million. For construction this summer. One of the services that's necessary in association with this project is construction, engineering, and inspection services. The local Highway Technical Assistance Council that is managing the project budgeted $766,000 for those services. On September 4th, they published a request for proposals, and 7 qualified engineering firms responded. A 5-person selection panel then reviewed those 7 proposals and recommended selection of Civil Science Incorporated as the firm to provide those services in the contracted amount of $637,182. as just over 16.5% of the overall construction budget, which is deemed to be a reasonable amount for those services. This agreement is before the council for your review and approval, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
This
Have
also
any
came,
questions?
well, I was just going to tell you, this came to administrative committee meeting, of course, and I did have quite a few questions about subcontractors, because there was a lot I didn't understand, and I got a good education about how the state will be running the whole project, and we just get updates quarterly, but the staff gets a lot more information weekly about what's happening, and that was what I didn't understand, and so that was clarified.
Anybody else have any questions for Bill regarding this professional service agreement?
I appreciate that you commented on that 16.59% being deemed reasonable by LTAC and city staff, because I would not know what is reasonable, so thank you.
Traditionally, LTAC budgets about 25 to 30%, depending upon the project, for construction engineering and inspection
Okay.
services. So hitting at well under 20% is deemed to be a fair price.
Okay.
Well, I'd move approval of the professional services agreement with Civil Service, Inc., Civil Science, Inc.
Okay. It's been moved to approve the professional service agreement with Civil Service by Art and seconded by Gina. Any further discussion on the matter? Start with Catherine.
Aye?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Belknap. That's the last item on our regular agenda. We're on to reports now from the council. And we'll start with Art, I guess, on that.
I got nothing for you.
Okay, that didn't take long. Ann?
So at the most recent PBAC meeting, we're still working on a LEAP analysis, so that's legislative, executive, admin, and public. And just looking at where sticking points might be for soliciting funding and moving forward with the project. And that's being worked on in tandem with solidifying an RFP to hire a project manager. And so the sequencing for that is that they're hoping to have the LEAP analysis done by the end of December, because we want to have that in place before hiring someone to manage it, certainly. And so that is currently with U of I, and I'll have more updates for you as they come up.
So that has to do with project selection?
The RFP.
Yes.
So the LEAP analysis is helping construct the RFP in sort of the scope of what that person is going to be doing. And then that person will be managing the project in terms of, I believe it's sort of outreach and engaging with different stakeholders as we move through the process. Does that help answer your question? Or
Yeah, well, I was trying to get down to whether we're selecting a specific project, like, are we gonna do recharge, are we
Oh,
gonna
the four
pump water from the
alternatives.
Snake River? Of the four alternatives that have been identified,
Yeah.
we're ahead of that, right?
Yeah, so the committee still wants to take that to the public, and so that's going to be a big part of whoever has that position, is doing that sort of stakeholder engagement to help narrow them down. There are ones that are certainly more appealing and more feasible based on research that's been presented over time, but not one in particular to go out and advocate for, which is the purpose of having the multiple alternatives still.
Right, so the project is actually gathering information rather than
Yep.
selecting.
Yep.
Thank you. I just wanted to
Helping to narrow
clarify
it
that in
down,
case.
yeah.
Okay, and you have any other
Nope,
reports?
That's it for me.
Randy?
I have no reports.
Gina?
I just have one. I attended the CETA meeting last Thursday in Lewiston, and I've been incorrect all along when I told you they have already changed from a C4 nonprofit to a C3 nonprofit. They're still in process there, and it could be middle of next year before that gets completed. They reevaluated and changed their dues structure this past year, and for most of their members, it actually increased dues. They are getting a little bit of pushback on that, and what they are seeing is that there are a couple organizations that are asking either for temporary forgiveness of the increase, or they have to drop their membership. And so we're kind of at a crossroads there in that, how they handle that. It was interesting in the room that night, there was one side that was decidedly against allowing any kind of forgiveness, and one side that thought forgiveness was a good idea. I thought the holidays were coming, and we were heading towards being nice. But I think that the issue really still is not resolved, and it is more than probably 10 of the members that are raising problems with this concept. I mean, it's very hard for a small city to belong to an organization like that when the dues go up as precipitously as they did. So that's ongoing. And they did also find out that they received 2 specific pots of money that they weren't anticipating getting, and that was kind of nice. It was about $100,000 more. And then they also have begun discussions, and again, it was preliminary at this point, but they were approached by a bank, and again, they can't tell you which bank, but the concept was to fund some of the projects that would construct that middle to last mile of fiber to the homes. Again, this is a gigantic amount of money for those kind of things. So it's not a tiny bank, it's a big bank. That's all they could tell us. And so there'll be more coming, but it could very well be a duplication of efforts or a complementary effort to what the county, Latah County, is doing already. So I'll keep you up to date on that as it develops.
Ellen meets monthly.
Oh, I was just gonna ask a couple questions. Are dues the same across the board for different members?
I don't think so.
Different city
It's a
sizes pay
sliding
different.
scale based
Yeah,
on
it's-
city size.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what are they and what are they being proposed to be raised to?
How precipitous
What's it
is
as a
precipitous?
percentage?
Yeah, I don't have that. For us, I believe the increase was somewhere around $300, if I recall. I I don't have a specific recollection. I can certainly get that information and send it out to council.
Yeah, I'm just curious as a ballpark even. So that's,
I think it was
Roughly.
3 to 700. I think there was a good,
It could be. It was enough that we discussed it with the mayor, and it came through in the budget, and council approved the gross amount, but, so it was called out, but I can, like I said, I'll send that information back out.
they're getting a lot of pushback, as do every economic development organization, on the return on investment. And so it's been interesting how they don't want to ask us for our deliverables, but they're getting really close to asking us for our deliverables. And I will definitely share them, because there are some quantifiable ways to prove value. And so I think that, economic development is changing, and CETA is seeing that. So I'll keep you updated.
thank you for the info.
Yeah.
Excuse me, the increase was about $550,
Yeah.
and then it's set to increase by about another $2,000 over the next 6 years. So that'll be an object of discussion.
Indeed. And I am not able to go to the Parks and Rec meeting on Thursday that I'm slated for, because my day job's getting in the way. We're having a mayor's roundtable out in Deary, so if someone would like to attend for me, it is the best commission ever.
I'm already at Fair and Affordable Housing that day. Thank you.
I think you ought to experience it at least once in your lifetime.
What time is it at?
5:15, and they feed you. And there's always dinner and goodies afterwards.
You're selling this
I'll
pretty
get back
good,
to you. I
Gina.
think I can.
Okay.
And I think it's at 4. What time do they meet? Earlier or later?
No,
They're
it's
like
5:15 to
5:15.
usually
Oh, okay.
7, because their agendas are packed. And
Yeah.
they're a committed group of folk.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you, Gina.
You're welcome.
Catherine?
Sustainable Environment met till 10:30. And so I've been kind of sending some notes about maybe the agendas are too full, but we have great presentations, and Kelly Cooper of the city presented the city's sustainability report, which is online for you to see, and all the cuts and changes that have been made. And then there was a lot of discussion about the RF 100 and a climate action plan by the subcommittee. And then there was a presentation by a lady from the Nez Perce tribe named Stephanie Kranz, and she is the climate change coordinator, and she presented a no analog future to climate change planning. And she also sent her full PowerPoint presentation and talked about the vast amount of lands that the tribes have to mitigate climate change for, and showed the things that they were doing. And like the Coeur d'Alene tribe has been working on this for the past 10 years, and they're already doing their update on their climate change plan and the things that we could learn from working with the tribe. So her presentation was, again, all of the presentations at this committee are always really interesting, and she sent that out so you could see that too.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
The tribes are required to do this by the federal government, even though they're a sovereign nation?
She
Or
didn't.
they're doing it on their own, for
Yes,
their
I
own?
think they're doing it on their own.
Okay.
They recognize, because she talked about that, like the Nez Perce have 770,000 acres. And so they talked about their relationships and ecosystems, and that would be like 10 national forests. So because they have so much land they're having to manage, they're trying to figure out how to best deal with climate change. And that we could learn, the cities, and we're a small enough city in terms of what we can do. And that's what she was saying, you know, like, a lot of this that you're already doing is great, but you also have many more things you could learn from them and do. So her presentation was, like I said, it's on the Sustainable Environments Committee meeting agenda, and then the links are there. And so that was good. So her name again was Stephanie Krantz, and she was with the Nez Perce tribe. And then this afternoon, there was a video sent out from Tony Bonicelli, the principal of Moscow Charter School, and he sent it to us, all as council in Edmond, because we're getting a lot of drop-off of plastic, but we also have construction, and I don't know if you had a chance to view the video, but the man drove on our sidewalks. Even though everything's posted, he drove where we walked. So please take a moment and read your email, and I think this is growing a lot. You know, we're like 7,000 pounds of plastic, and we are just at the tip for our community, and we need to maybe have a discussion. I know that Tyler and Tim and are looking into deeply studying this to figure out what we could do, but in the meantime, I think I was told that basically we're not going to get to collect anymore because students are being, it's unsafe.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out what to do in terms of making this continue to work. So
It sounds like basically what you need is a drop-off point that's independent of the school.
Yeah, and I've had that conversation, and we have all the things that we can put in place from I put up a 27-second video, I don't know if you saw it, that shows the small baler being used to make the 450-pound. So it's not that it's difficult, and then it gets put on the pallet and then gets taken to Safeway. We can no longer utilize the partners. They won't take them loose. They won't take the plastic bags loose anymore. It has to be palletized because of the quantity.
But that process is easy.
That process is easy. We just need to do something in the time period that the city decides whether or not this is going to be something that we provide.
And it's not possible for Moscow Recycling to have a place to put this plastic?
Well, Josh and I discussed last time, he said we could store the plastic in the baler. So I've been bringing everything over in our pickup, and we can compact it until we get a full bale size and then take it over. So it's a small logistical piece that we haven't figured out. But the problem is we have so many people coming into the school, and with all the construction, they're driving down the fire lane. And so this guy just took off also down a sidewalk. And so
So what's keeping?
What's keeping Moscow Recycling from putting in a bin for plastic that
There
would
were-
ordinarily go?
they say that it has to do with getting it done, getting it baled. It takes less than an hour for the amount. That's what Josh and I figured out. He's really happy to do it. We just don't.
So basically, we just need volunteer labor to bale the plastic, and they would provide a bin for drop-off?
I don't know if they'll provide a bin. They're worried about contamination. They're worried about, and the day that we did the collection, and we put that container, that held the 100 pounds, it was less than a quarter full of contamination. And I was out there for the whole time. So we have a community that's educated and wants the service, we just haven't figured out how to service it.
So when you collect plastic at the school, how do you regulate the contamination there?
I look through things, but we don't have a lot of contamination anymore. In the very beginning, we had contamination when people were learning what plastic film was, but we don't have a lot of contamination now.
Wasn't there maybe some possibility of just doing a monthly drop-off and tell everyone, just hold on to your stuff for a month?
That was
Because then
dis-
there's the volunteers like they had the last time.
That was
can-
discussed, but the city hasn't stated that. I do know, after talking to Tim and the manager at Safeway, that they have put up a sign, they said, to say that they are no longer taking loose materials, but I haven't gone by to check to see if it's there. Because if you're dropping off at Safeway now, it's just going into the dumpster.
Well, it seems to me at this point, it's really not a city program. This is an independent.
It's never been a city program.
Right, it's not.
I mean,
It's not a city
recycling
program,
was,
so
but
we should be able to do this independently with Moscow Recycling.
right?
So basically, it's a labor issue, because if they're willing to put up a bin to collect it,
I don't know about that part.
huh?
I don't know if they're gonna, he said I can bring it. He's worried about people just dropping off. He really doesn't want to have just people dropping.
If we had a
off.
specific drop-off day, as Brandy suggests, where you or some other volunteer monitors the drop-off and it gets bailed immediately, then it should be a doable thing, eh?
If I may,
It's very doable.
Mr. Reed?
why don't we have Tim come and report to Public Works Committee next Monday, and then we'll at least know where we are on it.
No, and what would he report? What,
We'll report what the status is. As he indicated in his email back to Mr. Bonicelli today,
I'm sorry, I had a faculty meeting and I
Oh.
just came straight, so I didn't see
he
it.
said that he is currently working on a monthly or some program where they would have a collection day and bail, so people would hang on to it, like we used to do with household hazardous waste and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But again, it involves contract negotiations with LSI and Moscow Recycling and that sort of thing. The idea isn't that the city does not want to get involved in it. It's a matter of coordinating everything. So I can discuss that with Tim. We can have a report by next Monday.
Yeah, and that's what Tim told me too. I just don't
Sure.
know what's happening, but in the meantime,
Sure.
we're at a place where,
We'll just tell
Maybe
people to
just need
hang
to
on
tell
to
everybody
it.
to hold
when
on
there's
to
some-
it.
hang on to it, yeah, I
Things
think so.
happening.
Yeah.
Okay. The only report I have is that tomorrow at 3 o'clock at the 1912 Center, the bids will be open for the second floor renovation. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there, how much that's actually going to cost.
I think it's at 4 o'clock.
I think it's 3. Well, maybe it is, because it's the 3rd at 4 o'clock.
Would you like me to pull that up?
Yeah, go ahead and do that. That's what I thought it was. I had 3 PM on my phone, but, from when I talked to Jenny last, but
1 second.
I think it's between 3 and 4.
This is just a reminder that we'll be looking forward to our bid opening for the second floor renovations Tuesday, December 3rd at 4 PM.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification, because when I went to the first bid opening that didn't occur, I think she told me it was 3 o'clock, and that's why I have that. So thank you, Sandra.
And I appreciate
Mr.
what you
Reader,
said
do you
with
have any
the,
reports?
Tim, the email. Yeah, I just saw it.
Have any reports for us?
No
this
report
evening?
from staff?
Okay, guess that would
We are
conclude our
request-
regular meeting if but we're going to adjourn to an executive session per Idaho Code 74-206, D, C, and F. The meeting will not reconvene. Perfect.
Yeah, there needs to be a motion and a second and a vote on that.
Make a motion to adjourn and move to executive session.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved by Brandy, seconded by Gina to adjourn to executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you all for coming to this evening's meeting.